Welcome, everybody. Here we are for another episode of the Corner Blue, episode 66. I'm Andres Rico, and I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. Hugo, how are you doing, man? It's been a bit.
Good. Happy New Year. Happy New
Happy New
Year
Year, man.
to Andres, to your family, and to all of our listeners. It's good to be back.
Definitely. So here we start 2024 with an interesting game in the horizon. A lot of changes. We went over some of them in the last episode. And right as we posted, uh, it was announced that the new coach had been found, and then um, the actual presentation occurred within the first week of January, and La Fesfoot has hired manager David Doniga from Spain. He's a former assistant of Tomás Christensen's staff in Panama, a former U23 Panamanian coach with experience in the Panamanian League, someone that, is a little closer to home, that doesn't seem like much of a stretch in terms of getting to know the area, familiarity with the region. Not a surprise to me. It's what it definitely is, a launching pad for foreign-based coaches, as we've talked about many times here. We'll get to know him soon enough, see what style or what he will bring to La Selecta as they move forward into competition for this year. Uro, how have you been doing? What have your sensations been with the changes, the upcoming game versus Inter de Miami? How do you take, the upcoming action that La Sul is going to be having?
Well, I think I'm looking forward to having some type of stability. That's I think that going through a lot of changes in a year where we began World Cup qualifiers is not ideal for anyone. So my first impressions of the new coach. He seems like a pretty down to earth guy who's very clear in what he wants, how he wants the team to play. I think it is a benefit compared to the former coach that he has coached in Central America. That I think that more than having coach in Panama, um, I think it's there is added benefit that he coached the Panamanian national team because he played against us. And in those games, he knows because as coaches, the coaches have to analyze the teams, and I'm sure him and Christiansen know our players really well, and that's a plus because you start with someone who knows more over players compared to the former coach, and it's yeah it's I mean, I think given the circumstances, I think it's a good option. I think it's a good choice. um I think it's interesting to hear that Diogo said that when the media questioned him about why not bring in a local coach, he mentioned that,
Mhm.
yes, he mentioned that the players had requested that the coach it's a foreign based coach, which is interesting because I think that sometimes when you're involved in this business, you do hear things, and obviously things that sometimes you don't want to say if you don't know them firsthand, because you don't want to create chambre. I mean, chambre is good to sell and clicks and all of that, but on more than one occasion, Andres, you and I, probably in private conversations with uh, former players, we've heard that some of the local coaches' uh, coaching style leave a lot to be desired. I mean, I honestly have gone as far as hearing that there's nothing really happening other than ponerle producto de gallina, and that's about it. I mean, as ridiculous as it sounds, and I'm not saying that's the case with all the coaches, but I've heard that on multiple occasions from players, and it's interesting. So it's interesting that the players are speaking up and asking for what they want. So, and in terms of the game, I mean, it should be a great show. It's I mean, you are playing against an MLS side with almost like a, a quarter of the Barcelona of the best Barcelona that we've seen in the last 10 years. Obviously, they're more closer to retiring, but who doesn't want to see those guys play? I mean, people go see them when they retire and they're viejitos, like Ronaldinho. And here we are with Messi, Busquets, Jordi Alba, Suarez, who are still active and and playing for their national teams, with the exception of a few. But man, I think all of them were playing as of recently for their national teams. So it's gonna be an interesting game. I mean, I don't really know, if I can have an expectation necessarily. The coach has two sessions in. Um, as he said, this is not necessarily a team that he's chosen because that would be unrealistic. It's a team that has been put together by um uh some of the coaching staff who has been involved in the with the national team in the last few months. So we'll see. I think it's just the beginning, and we'll see what the next couple of months have. And I think we might see a little bit of another showcase so that he can find the ideal players for his style.
All right, so let's just jump in right away to the list. Um, I'd like to remind everyone it's not an official FIFA match day. So, of course, there's limitations right off the bat of who you can call up. On top of that, you have players that, are in the middle of the off season when it comes to, players in the US and MLS, USL. So there's different levels of fitness, also to take into consideration. Clubs aren't obligated to lend their players out to a match like this. So you look at the list and you can see that, you can only assume that there were definite constraints to deal with when coming up with this list. Another curious thing that I had heard, and I forget where exactly during the past week, was that supposedly another constraint on the list was the fact that the first division in El Salvador had agreed to only lend out two players per team, something I can't confirm. But if you look at the list, you see that that's kind of a pattern throughout where you don't see, four or five players from Águila or from Alianza as we've seen in the past. Um, I'll go over the list. So at keepers, we have Mario Gonzalez, Oscar Pleites, Danilo Hoya. The defenders called up Brian Tamacas, who just announced his contract extension with the Oakland Roots. Good to know that he's going to be playing in the USL for a while. Then we have Tereso Benitez, who plays for Municipal Limeño. Jefferson Valladares, who was one of, the players that was showcased during De La Barrera's brief tenure. Diego Flores. Hugo, you had mentioned that he's a left back, right? That
He's a
plays for
left back,
Firpo.
yeah.
We have Eduardo Vigil from Fuerte San Francisco. Jorge
He's back
Cruz.
after being absent for quite some time.
Yeah, yeah. I remember he played some of the friendly matches with Hugo Perez, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, and he played some qualifiers, and and,
Hmm.
and he actually he did okay. He did. he did well, but when you have Zabaleta and Cabalceta as options, I think he ended up being more of a third option. But I believe he
And
even played a
Dominguez too.
game.
Hmm.
Yeah, he played against the US, I believe, Vigil, and played a pretty good match.
Jorge Cruz from Once Deportivo, Melvin Cruz from Dragón, Rudy Clavel from FAS, Isaac Portillo, who's still in the process of signing. His contract with Alianza just ended, so we'll see where he ends up. Um, in the midfield, we have Cristian Martinez, who I think we saw kind of rise into a leadership role over the last couple of games. Harold Osorio continues with his streak of call-ups after his injury. Fernando Sanchez from Santa Tecla. Darwin Seren was one of the surprises on this list. After successful campaigns with Águila, he makes his comeback. Armando Moreno is called from El Paso Locomotive. Melvin Cartagena from Águila. Uh, Leo Mengíbar from Alajuelense. Steven Guerra from Dragón. Eduardo Rivas from Santa Tecla. Hugo mentioned earlier when we were talking that he's called up. I think this is his first time to the senior squad since playing for the U20s a couple years ago. And to close out the midfield, Eric Calvillo is called up from El Paso Locomotive. Then with the forwards, we have Javier Ferman from Limeño, Steven Vasquez from Firpo, and Nelson Bonilla makes his return from Sukhothai FC. So that's the list. I mentioned the constraints just so that there's a little context to it. So you're not too surprised with, the different names, the limitations and whatnot. But if anything that stands out, I think, it's interesting to see Seren back, to see Bonilla back. You have the Tamacas, who's, the veteran in the defense. So at least you have kind of like an anchor in each sector of the field. Narciso Orellana is out with an injury, so I think that's why that explains some of the modifications in the midfield. But I feel like most of the familiar faces, again, are in the midfield. I feel like that's always been a Salvador's strong point is the midfield. So, we'll see if it's five spots in the midfield, four spots in the midfield, or just three. We'll see how Doniga uh, sets up his formation. What's your sensation with this list, Ugo?
Well, it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid of everything we've seen in the last year, I think. Um, I think if this had been in a FIFA window, we would probably be seeing uh, the Heel brothers, maybe Enrico, I don't know. Um, so I think with all the limitations of playing in a non-FIFA date, I think the list is uh, it, it, it it's a good list, I think, to start for the coach to start seeing mostly some of the local guys, some of the guys that maybe he's been scouting already for since he found out that he was the new coach, and like Christian and Armando, uh, Bonilla. I mean, Bonilla, I'm not against Bonilla getting called. I think that he brings a lot to the table. Uh, Experience, obviously, but in the national team, I think he's always been a player who performs, whether that's by creating spaces or scoring goals or assists. He's been a pretty good player in the national team, and I think he brings a lot to the table with his experience. So yeah, it's a good list. I mean, when I said earlier that it's hard to have like an expectation, if we really, you know, look at the situation. The local players, they're all they just started. They're 1 week into their preseason. maybe some teams who started earlier 2 weeks into their preseason. They haven't played friendly matches. They haven't, that it's probably been mostly uh, fitness work. Then you look at the USL players that have been called up. Brian Tamakas, he's hasn't played in a long time, but he's been training uh, consistently in El Salvador. You look at Harold Osorio. Um, uh, I think the Bonilla has been the only one who was probably active prior to the Christmas break. Um, and then you look at Christian, the same as Salvadorian teams. They probably started preseason 2 weeks ago. Um, then if you look at the USL guys, USL hasn't started their preseason. MLS hasn't started their preseason. So um, all of those guys have probably been doing work on their own to stay fit, but it's not the same. So um, it's going to be interesting to see how physically how the team is doing. And let's also keep in mind that Inter Miami is in a similar situation because they're also coming from the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, as you were mentioning with Bonilla, I think seeing him back is something important. Um, he may not be an explosive nine. He may not be known for extravagant goals or even the number of goals in the national team, but he brings a level of association of playing off the people around him that I feel is missing from Brian Heed's game, for example. So I think by having someone, I wouldn't call him a false nine, but by having someone that can track back a little bit more, set up a little bit more plays, and not just be your classic nine, your striker up front. I think that's going to help an attack that has just been disjointed for the longest time. There's a reason why there's a winless streak. So having someone like that, it goes into what we've spoken about previously of having a generational transition. And I think by bringing in a veteran like Bonilla, who's played in friendly matches against, you know, elite national teams, that hopefully that type of experience he can bring that to the team, on and off the pitch. We'll see what what midfield we end up with. It'd be interesting to see if Martinez starts alongside that wing. What would that combination look like? I think based off of Martinez's abilities, maybe he would be your classic stopper, and Seren would play a little bit in front of him and work on distribution. Then you could throw in Amando there if you wanted as well. And I mean, that right there sounds like a pretty decent midfield if you're just playing with the three. And then you could always throw in Melvin or Machito in there. So in that sense, I'm more curious to see what they do with the midfield because I think the midfield is the closest that we're gonna get to, you know, the list when it comes to official match days. Defense, it just looks like a total casting. We'll see what comes out of this. Maybe Valladares gets more continuation, but then you have that Tamacas Valladares debate or who's going to be on the right flank. And due to experience, you'd assume that and his performances, you'd assume that Tamacas kind of has that upper hand. I don't know. And
Yeah,
then
and Valladares can also play as a right mid.
And then I'm thinking the center backs will probably be Isaac Portillo. And then maybe it would be Vigil or Clavel helping him out. That's what I'm assuming. I'm the least familiar with some of the defensive choices. But this, like you said, it definitely has a feel of a hybrid between the extremes of De La Barrera's call-ups versus Hugo Perez's squads. But it definitely has a feel of, the teams that would get called up for La UNCAF back in the day, where, that they weren't going with the heavy guns necessarily all the time. And it was that first activity in the year to get things going. And I mean, of course, it's exciting to know that this match, hopefully will go down in history, alongside when Pelé played versus Alianza, when Barcelona played versus FAS way back in the day, when El Cusca was inaugurated, or when La Selecta played Boca in LA before the 82 World Cup. It's those types of matches that we don't see that often that, it's a special occasion and hopefully it's a fun match to watch. Um, Hugo, are you going to be making the trek over?
That's the plan. Yeah,
Nice,
that's the
nice.
plan. Looking forward to it.
So what
First
what
match ever at the Cusca.
what are you looking the most forward to? What's something that when you think about it, it just gets you amped?
I don't know. I mean, it's well, being there at the stadium, I really don't know how the sales are going for the game. It would be great if it's a full house, and get to experience that, get to experience what I watch many times on TV. I don't know if the vibe is going to be the same as a World Cup qualifier playing against Mexico or USA. I think this is going to be more of a celebratory type of thing for Messi. I mean, it's no surprise that Salvadorian people are big fans of Barcelona or Real Madrid. And Messi just being um, the best player in the world, um, being there is it's like I don't think there's gonna be that passion for the national team as we have for a World Cup qualifier. Um, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to possibly being a field level. Even though you can't really watch the games when you're on like a field level, but yeah, I mean, I'm going with my dad, so it should be a pretty special time
That's awesome.
um to go watch my first game at El Cusca, against Messi's Inter Miami. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, if going to Cusca in the rain versus San Kitts y Nevis was fun and there was atmosphere, I'm pretty sure going to Cusca and having Messi and co on the pitch at the same time, there's definitely going to be an environment. And truly, I'm happy for you because, yeah, it's a unique experience being able to go to Cusca. Um, it was something that I was pondering whether to go, but as I mentioned in the previous episode, um, just the prices of stuff, it's hard to me to justify going. Whenever I go to the stadium, it's an experience I like sharing with my family over there. And, just due to financial constraints, there's just something that, it's not like I can drop coin and have my family go with me and they can't either. So, we'll be watching from far away, but definitely happy for everyone that gets to go to the game. You know, uh, People back at Cusca after the tragedy last year. So hopefully things are handled in a more orderly fashion so that, that type of tragedy doesn't happen again. So a bittersweet, start to the year, but I think more than anything, it's just the next step towards fine tuning, moving forward, and like you said, seeking out that stability that has not been there for a while. I mean, some of the news coming out, you know, Coach Perez is still in the process of getting, um, ¿cómo se dice indemnización, compensation, right? Yeah. Well, Perez is still trying to figure out getting compensated for being sacked. We got the news of the conditions which the previous manager, Rubén de la Barrera, ended up exiting. So yeah, La Selecta's just been marred in all this doubt, doom and gloom. But now that the game versus Inter Miami is right on the horizon, we come out of the woodwork with our curiosity, with that masochista mentality that we all have, the short-term memory, I guess you could say too. And watching Lasud going up against, one of the greatest of all time, who isn't going to be interested in something as special as that? Um, and here's to hoping that this isn't his only time there. Like, it'd be amazing if for the CONCACAF Champions League, at some point, Inter de Miami has to go back to El Salvador and play one of the local teams. I think that would be amazing with something on the line and Messi at Cusca, that would be amazing too. Um, Also, we haven't mentioned the U20 has competition up, and along with Doniga being announced as manager, Juan Cortés, the previous coach of Alianza, and then he was also with Once, was it Once Deportivo
I think so.
when they won the Mickey Mouse Championship? Um, No offense on Once Deportivo, but he was named as an assistant to Loniga and the manager of the U20s, and they have competition coming up this month. Uro, would you care to explain what that competition is and some of the players that have been called up for that?
Yeah, so it's a competition. I believe it was created by CONCACAF during the pandemic because, as you remember, I think the U17 World Cup qualifier was canceled during the pandemic. So then, when things were coming back, the UNCAF tournaments, regional tournaments, have been created to kind of give more opportunities for those players to play. So it's not the World Cup qualifier. It's just it's a tournament. It is an UNCAF tournament, but it's more of a for a preparation. And in
So
terms of
UNCAF
the
Junior, basically.
yeah, yeah, correct. This is kind of like if you remember when Jerson was heading the U20, they played the Dallas Cup, and then right after they had the UNCAF tournament, and then the qualifiers. The list is it's a good list. I mean, if you ask me from a perspective of a scout and uh more players that fit into that category, there's more players. I don't know if they're gonna get to go or not, or I really don't know. That's up to the coaches. But it's a pretty good hybrid. There's quite a few guys from the former U17. There's the DC United goalkeeper, Alexander Arias, I think is his name. Um, there's um, there's a couple of guys in the midfield. There's the forward Argueta who did really well. Also coming back. I think there's like four or five guys from the previous U17, and the new faces. It's Marcos Casillas, a guy that I've been following, and I posted a few things about him. He plays for Rayo Vallecano, uh, the youth, one of the youth teams. He his grandfather from his mom's side is Salvadorian, and he got his passport way before he was even an option to play for the national team. So we'll see. Hopefully, he's a defensive midfielder. We'll see how he does. And there's a guy from Cruz Azul, a guy with a triple nationality from Cruz Azul youth. And then there's another guy from Catalonia, from the regional league in Catalonia, from gymnastic. Uh, I think they just call it nastic or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's a nickname.
Yeah. And I know that that team played against the team where the others guy who we're hoping that he can be added at some point um, from former Girona, uh, Itzel Colocho, uh, who now plays for Dam Academy. Um, Hopefully he can, once he can settle his documentation, he can be an option as well. But it's an interesting list. But like I said, there's also more guys that we'll see if they get a chance to be seen. There's a few in Sweden who fall into that category, the 2005s, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be both the U20 and the senior coach are in the same situation. They are. Maybe Cortez had a little bit more of a an advantage because he's been coaching in El Salvador, so he knows some of the players, knows some of the coaches, so he can get some suggestions. But I think that the teams that we're going to end up seeing in the actual qualifiers might be a little different than what we're seeing now.
Well, just as a superficial observation, it seems that there is an openness to using or calling up more of the youngsters born abroad without as much of a negative reaction from the press or fans. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how this carries through the senior squad. And hopefully the next chapter gets started on the right foot. Um, and then on to February when la Selecta plays Costa Rica. Um, and yeah, I think we're gonna close on that. There's just that bunch of information that's come out. All we can do is wait for the match against Inter Miami, and expect a full-on report from Mr. Selecta Talent himself.
From field level,
Yeah,
we're going to be reporting live now. I
as
don't know.
as he as he makes his debut at Cusca, and I'm really happy for you, man. It's a long time coming, and I hope you have the time of your life, man.
Thanks. Thanks. I'm really looking forward to it. And also, well, probably another episode, but the women's national team, the senior team has that important game against Guatemala to go to the first ever Gold Cup.
Oof, yeah.
So that's big.
We need to definitely
February.
um dedicate more time and episodes to the women's team that is making huge strides. I mean, we're talking about players making, an exodus of players to Mexico, which is something that, within years of, this team getting its start, the league in Israel is not as sophisticated as it should be, and incorporating foreign-based players, and they're making jumps to important leagues. It's huge. So hopefully we can get some interviews going, see what's happening in that process, and definitely talk about it more because it is amazing what's going on there. And imagine they make it to the Gold Cup, like huge
I
strides.
I think it's gonna
Huge
happen.
strides. From
I'm
watch
looking forward to going to that game too. It's gonna be here in LA.
Oh, snap. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, so just think about it. Considering their games used to be only streamed like on Twitter, from going to that, and it's not even an official broadcast. It's just someone with like a phone going live on Facebook or Twitter or something like that, to now, their games are being broadcast, their scouts watching them, they're getting signed to leagues either in Europe or in the rest of the Americas. And now we're seeing players from the NWSL, making that commitment to the national team. You only hope that, this wave of positivity, this momentum, this inertia continues for the women's side. And I tip my hat off. I got my headphones out, but I tip my hat off to them, and we definitely need to dedicate more time to them. Um, so on that note, we do have some stuff to look forward to. And we'll see how this whole process ends up with fine tuning and getting the right list, so that come June, at least there's some semblance of hope of competing and fighting for that spot, that we covet so much. So in any case, thank you for listening. Thanks, Will, for taking the time, and hopping on the podcast. Remember to like and subscribe. Keep sharing the word of mouth, and we'll be posting stuff as the game gets closer, and busting out an episode maybe while Hugo is on assignment out in San Salvador. That'd be amazing, man. But in any case, appreciate all of you, and we'll see you guys next time.